Hello there everybody, Bunneh here, and welcome to a video where I plan on testing and potentially debunking some of your ARK myths and questions. In my last two ARK Survival Ascended videos, I received a lot of comments questioning certain mechanics of the game, and if some things translated over from the original ASE. I figured that an exploratory video would be necessary in order to get to the bottom of all these inquiries, separating fact from fiction, and once and for all concluding whether or not flirting as a female character bags you free shit. Okay, that one in particular I don't even have to test, because all of my time in old school RuneScape confirms it. Thirsty simps on the internet will give you free things if you flirt with them. You just have to have the right assets. Moving on. Does having longer arms block shots from turrets, and thus disperse turret damage more? Okay, this one shouldn't be too hard to test. I've made a male character with the smallest arms possible, and set up a small base with auto turrets and an ungodly amount of bullets. I walked straight into the firing range of the turrets and attempted to check my armor, but I was dead before my inventory even opened up. Upon respawning and checking the status of my armor, we can all see that my legs were completely broken, my chest piece lost about a quarter of its health, and the other armor is slightly damaged. I retested this from multiple angles at different starting positions to ensure the testing was as accurate as possible, but with something like this, I knew the results were going to be variable. It does seem that your character's animations or extremity positions can alter the damage that you take from turret fire, so I'm curious to retest this with a different character. I created a character with the largest arms possible, and repeated the first test of walking in a straight line towards the turrets. Shockingly, I died. Upon checking my armor, you can see that my legs still ended up breaking, but interestingly enough, my gloves were at about half durability, and the rest of my armor was barely scratched. This indicates that my arms did in fact get in the way of the turret fire, and helped to spread out the damage some more. I repeated this test from multiple angles and body positions again, but the results were once again too variable to really rely on. It does seem that your arms can block shots to your legs on occasion, but is it enough to justify the monstrosity of a character build? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you guys. Either way, I'm gonna chalk this myth up as true, but highly variable. Do larger hands make it harder to drop an equipped item via whip or those annoying fucking seagulls? Unfortunately, I can't test the whip component of this question because Scorched Earth hasn't been released yet, and thus whips are not in the game. The seagull component, though, I suppose I can manage to test that. I made a character with the smallest arms and smallest hands possible, and spawned in dozens of those obnoxious wastes of oxygen. I let them attack me 50 times, losing the item in my hand a total of 4 times. I felt like this number was a bit low, to be honest, but those are the results. I've repeated this same test again using a character with the largest arms and largest hands possible, and the results were identical, losing the item in my hand 4 times in 50 attacks. Now, some could argue that these test numbers are too small, and you would need much larger batches of information to solidly conclude whether this was true or not, but for me this is evidence enough. I mean, if I lose the item in my hand the same amount of times in 50 attacks, regardless of my hand size, how big of a difference could it possibly be making? In my opinion, none, or so very little that you would never perceive it in-game. I think it's safe to say that this myth has been debunked. If you're low on health, is it beneficial to poop to lose food faster, and in turn heal faster from eating? Now, I think that the OP of this comment meant to say use the defecate button instead of using the term forego, which means to abstain from, but upon asking I never received a response, so I'm just gonna roll with my gut on this one. Testing this one should be simple enough, but it does involve a bit of setup. First, I shoveled down 5 pieces of cooked meat to get my stomach full, and then dropped my character off a 3-high wall to reduce my health. As you can see, my health is steadily rising at the expense of food depletion. I know from previous testing in a video that food depletes at approximately 0.2 food per HP restored, so let's see if taking a shit changes this. I repeat the test, but this time I had some nasty gas station tacos before dropping off the ledge, thus voiding my bowels all over this beautiful tech floor. I checked to see if there was any change in food depletion or health regen, but there was no difference whatsoever. I even repeated this test in super slow motion to ensure the numbers weren't even slightly different, and from what I can tell, it's still a loss of 0.2 food per 1 HP regenerated, and food depletion stops once health is fully restored. This means that defecating, or not defecating for that matter, has no impact on the amount of food that you lose, and thus will have no impact on health regen from eating. In summary, this myth has been debunked. Is movement speed, swimming speed, and fall damage the same between genders and sizes? This would have been a great one to test in my last video discussing if sizes or genders actually matter. Great video, by the way, would recommend 10 out of 10, but I simply overlooked the testing based on the findings in that video. That being said, it's easy enough to test. First, I created a structure with a track on the upper portion that was exactly 40 foundations long, and a swimming pool underneath that was also 40 foundations long. I tested walking, running, and swimming between the two different genders, one being a male with all the sliders turned down, and the other being a female with all the sliders turned up. As you can see from the side-by-side footage, whether it be walking, running, or swimming, the movement speed of these characters is identical. I also tested fall damage between these two characters, which seems to be unaffected by things like size or gender, but the results were variable every time I tested it. I even tested the same character dropping from the same height multiple times in succession and took a different amount of damage every time, more than likely relating to character velocity. Either way, the results were within a window that is statistically indifferent, so I'm classifying this myth as debunked. Are character hitboxes accurate while doing things like jumping, crouching, or riding a creature? This is an interesting question, and something I'm curious about myself. To keep the testing simple, I only used one mid-sized character in all of the scenarios. First, I tested jumping by aiming for headshots, body shots, arm shots, and leg shots. From what I can tell, a character's hitbox is accurate based on their animation, but I had a hard time landing consistent shots in the same area. I tested this in a crouched position as well, which was a whole lot easier to test since my alt account was completely still. It would seem that from the front and from the side, all the hitboxes seem to be pretty darn accurate to where they should be. This also seems to be the case on the back of a creature, although there are loads of saddles in the game and a lot of character animations mounting them, so I can't confirm the accuracy for all creatures. Either way, I think it's safe to say that this myth, or question, has been confirmed. Hitboxes are accurate, even with animations or saddling a creature. Does having a taller character have an advantage of landing more headshots in melee combat compared to a shorter character, and is it harder for a shorter character to land headshots on a taller character? The simple answer is yes and no. In my previous ASA video, I pointed out that character size doesn't change where your character's camera position's at, meaning that having a taller character doesn't necessarily enable you to look down on enemies. As you can see in this example, when I switch from third-person mode into first-person mode, my camera actually shifts downward significantly because its position is balanced across players of all sizes. This character's camera should be positioned at about the 7th rung of the ladder, given where his eyes are positioned, but in reality, the camera is only positioned around the 5th rung of the ladder. But if your opponent is super short, it means that you can keep your camera positioning relatively horizontal or even slope downwards to score headshots more easily. Jumping would also give you a slight advantage as you're attacking downwards during the descent, as opposed to having to aim upwards if your opponent is tall. As for headshots with a club, it would stand to reason that a taller character's head would be farther away from an opponent's melee range and more awkward to hit, so theoretically it would make headshots tougher to land. Is it actually enough of a difference to change the tide of a melee fight? Who knows? Being taller does have some slight advantages, but your hitbox is also larger as a trade-off. I'm gonna say that this is technically myth confirmed, but with some slight caveats. Do males still swing faster than females with pikes or axes? Now look, I've already proven once that there's no longer any differences in melee swing speed between genders, but apparently you motherfuckers still refuse to believe this is the case. You're really gonna make me test this with pikes and axes, aren't you? What's next, pickaxes and spatulas? Oh my god, why did I volunteer that? Anyways, here's a side-by-side comparison of a male character and a female character DPSing a straw dummy with a metal pike. As you can see, their animation and DPS output is the exact same. I've repeated this test with a metal hatchet and got the same result. No difference in animation or DPS output. Just to be safe, I retested both of these weapons against a wooden pillar, and as you can clearly see, the DPS output is the same for the metal pike and the same for the metal hatchet. And yes, in case you're wondering, I even took it one step further and tested this with a wooden club. Shockingly, the results were the same. Now please, for the love of God, would you guys finally just understand that there's no DPS discrepancy between genders anymore? There used to be an ASE, but now there isn't. This myth has been debunked! Can larger players that clip through structures be damaged compared to smaller players that don't clip through structures? This is a great question and something I was really curious about myself. I speculated that players couldn't be damaged through structures, but I wasn't 100% confident. I'm glad I tested this one out though, because the results were pretty shocking. As it turns out, your character's clipping body parts can be damaged through structures, but only certain ones. In this example, his head was sticking up through a sloped roof, and I was able to headshot him. When I retested this with his body clipping through walls or door frames though, the damage didn't register, so I think these are safe. Retesting this with his head clipping through a flat ceiling panel though, I was once again able to headshot him, so it would seem that vertical surfaces are safe, but horizontal or slope ones are not. I imagine this will get patched in the future, but for right now, be careful that those bodacious ass cheeks aren't clipping through the ceiling, or else your ass is getting penetrated.
What the
So, with that visualization burned into your brain, I think this is a great stopping point for this video. If you guys have any more questions or suggestions for future videos like this one, then be sure to leave me a comment down below. I would love to hear about what all kinds of weird things you've been told about the game, or just general things you've never got around to testing yourself. If you enjoyed this video, then please be sure to leave me a like down below, subscribe to the channel with notifications on to stay up to date on all of my latest content, join the Discord for a community of like-minded woodland creatures, and please keep leaving me comments because they warm my little Bunneh heart. Special thank you goes out to all of the Bunnehs that support me on Patreon. You guys are amazing, and if you would like to support me and the content that I create, you can now do so for as little as $1 a month. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.